I never imagined my pregnancy would take such a turn. At 35 weeks, I was supposed to be preparing for my baby's arrival, not lying in a hospital bed surrounded by monitors. But here I was, struggling to breathe, my heart racing in ways it shouldn't. COVID had hit me hard, and with my Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, things had quickly become more complicated than I ever expected. My small-town hospital wasn't equipped to handle my condition, so they transferred me to a larger facility. My partner James was by my side, holding my hand through every test, every monitor beep, every moment of uncertainty. He was my rock, the one who had been with me through every high and low of this pregnancy. Then, there was my mother, Linda. She lived an hour and a half away and couldn't drive because of her health issues. She had suffered a brain aneurysm years ago, followed by a series of strokes, which left her with cognitive difficulties. I knew she worried about me, but the way she handled stress was different. The first night in the hospital, I called her to let her know what was happening. She immediately started panicking, asking a million questions, her voice trembling. "Are they sure you're okay? What if something happens to the baby? What if they're not telling you everything?" I tried to reassure her. "Mom, they're monitoring everything closely. I'm not in immediate danger. James is here with me." That should have been enough, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be. The next morning, my phone buzzed, missed calls, texts. My mother was already spiraling. "Call me now," one message read. "I need to know what's going on." I sighed, rubbing my temple. I had barely gotten any rest, and my body was already exhausted. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. I barely had the energy to process what was happening to my own body, let alone deal with my mother's panic. Yet, as soon as I checked my phone, another call came through, her name flashing on the screen. I hesitated. I knew if I answered, it wouldn't be a short conversation. But if I ignored it, she'd only keep calling. With a deep breath, I picked up. "Mom, I'm okay," I said before she could start. Her voice was already high-pitched, frantic. "I've been calling all morning. Why didn't you answer? I thought something happened. What are the doctors saying? Are you worse?" I closed my eyes, trying to keep my patience. "Nothing has changed. They're just monitoring me. If something serious happens, I'll let you know." That should have been the end of it, but instead, she kept pressing. "I don't trust that hospital. What if they're hiding something? Maybe I should call and ask myself." I felt my chest tighten, not just from my condition, but from the frustration building inside me. "Mom, you don't need to do that. James is here, and I'm telling you everything I know." She let out a heavy sigh, but I could tell she wasn't satisfied. "I just worry about you so much," she murmured. I softened a little. I knew she meant well. "I know, Mom, but I promise, I'll keep you updated." We ended the call, but something about the conversation unsettled me. The way she said she didn't trust the hospital, the insistence that she needed to know more, it didn't sit right. Then, later that afternoon, James glanced up from his phone. "Did you tell your mom to call the hospital?" I frowned. "What? No. Why?" She just did. A wave of irritation surged through me. I had just told her I would update her. Yet, here she was, already going behind my back. I took a deep breath, gripping the hospital blanket in frustration. I had just spoken to her. I had reassured her. And yet, she had gone straight to the hospital behind my back. James watched me carefully. They wouldn't tell her anything, obviously, but she was demanding to know what was going on. I sighed. Of course she was. I reached for my phone, my fingers tightening around it as I dialed her number. She picked up almost immediately. "Finally, I was just about to call you again." I didn't even acknowledge that. "Mom, did you call the hospital?" She hesitated for half a second before responding. "Well, yes, but only because you weren't answering my texts fast enough. I needed to know if you were okay." I closed my eyes, willing myself to stay calm. "Mom, I already told you, James is here, and I'm keeping you updated. The hospital can't give you information. You're not my next of kin. Silence. Then, her voice hardened. Excuse me? I exhaled slowly. James is my next of kin, not you. He's the one the hospital communicates with if I can't. Her breath hitched. But I'm your mother. I know, but James is my partner. He's here with me. He knows my medical history, my wishes. He's the one I trust to make decisions if necessary. I expected her to be a little upset, maybe a bit hurt, but her reaction was more than that. You're shutting me out, she accused, her voice rising. I have a right to know what's happening with my own daughter. This is ridiculous. I tried again, forcing my voice to stay steady. Mom, calling the hospital isn't helping. It's only making things harder for me. But she wasn't listening. They should tell me everything. I'm your mother. I rubbed my temple as my heart monitor beeped rapidly beside me. This was going to be a problem. I took another slow breath, trying to keep my heart rate under control. The last thing I needed was more stress. Mom, I'm not hiding anything from you, I promise. But the hospital has rules. They can't give you information just because you're my mother. Her voice wavered between anger and desperation. That's ridiculous. I carried you for 9 months. I raised you. And now some hospital gets to decide that I don't matter? I sighed, rubbing my forehead. That's not what this is about. James is here. He knows my medical history. We've talked about my wishes if anything serious happens. He's the one who's physically with me right now. That's why he's my next of kin. The line was quiet for a moment, but I could hear her breathing heavily. Then, her voice broke. You don't understand how this feels. I've been awake all night, worried sick. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I just need to know what's going on. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I had to set a boundary. Mom, I get that you're worried, but stressing yourself out and calling the hospital over and over isn't helping me. If something changes, I will tell you. Her tone turned sharp. You don't get it. I'm your mother. I should be the first to know, not James. My chest tightened again, and the heart monitor beeped faster. I looked over at James, who was watching me carefully. He mouthed, "Breathe." I squeezed my eyes shut. Mom, I need to rest. Please stop calling the hospital. She sniffled. I'm sorry that I care about you. That was it. That was the guilt trip. I felt frustration rise in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm. I know you care, Mom. But right now, I need you to listen to me. She didn't respond. Instead, she just sighed heavily. Fine. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone, my pulse still racing. Something told me this wasn't over. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. I set my phone down, exhaling slowly. My head throbbed from the conversation and my chest felt tight. Not from my condition, but from the weight of my mother's words. James sat beside me, his hand resting gently on mine. Are you okay? I nodded, but we both knew I wasn't. She just doesn't get it. It's like she thinks this is happening to her. James frowned. She always makes everything about her. I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't new behavior. My mom had always had a way of turning my struggles into her own. I tried to rest, but less than an hour later, my phone buzzed again. Another call from my mom. I hesitated before answering. I'm sorry, she said immediately, her voice trembling. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I'm sick with worry. I rubbed my temple. Mom, I get it, but you have to let me focus on getting better. She sniffled. You don't understand what this is doing to me. I stiffened. What it was doing to her. I'm lying awake all night, thinking about you. I can't function. This is so stressful for me, she continued. You don't know what it's like to feel this helpless. Something in me snapped. Mom, I'm the one in the hospital. I'm the one hooked up to machines. I'm the one carrying a baby while dealing with heart issues, and somehow I'm the one who has to make you feel better. Silence, then a small, hurt voice. I'm sorry that I care so much. My jaw tightened. The manipulation was so clear, but it still made me feel guilty. James whispered, "Hang up." I almost did. But instead, I sighed. "Mom, I need to rest." "I love you," she said quickly. "Just remember that." I didn't answer. I just ended the call and let my phone fall onto the bed. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. This wasn't the first time my mother had acted this way. I had seen this pattern before, too many times. James shifted beside me. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" I sighed. She's always been like this. Anytime something happens, it somehow becomes about her. I thought back to all the times she had fallen in public, dramatically gasping for help. The supposed heart attacks that never led to a diagnosis. The way she always seemed to need medical attention when she wasn't the center of attention. "She loves the drama," I murmured. James nodded. "And you're giving her exactly what she wants by engaging with it." I frowned, torn between frustration and guilt. But what if she really is worried? James gave me a look. "She is. But not in the way you think. She doesn't want reassurance. She wants to be part of the crisis. If you were dying, she'd want to be in the middle of it, not to help, but so people would see how much she was suffering." The words stung because they felt true. I remembered being a kid, sitting in the hospital waiting room while she convinced a doctor she was having a stroke. I had cried, terrified, until I overheard a nurse say, "She's fine, just looking for attention again." That moment had stuck with me. And now, lying in this hospital bed, I felt like I was that kid all over again, watching my mother spin a situation into something bigger than it was, making it about her, while I was the one actually going through it. The realization settled in my chest like a weight. James squeezed my hand. "You don't owe her your energy right now." I nodded, but part of me wondered, if I stopped feeding into it, would she escalate? I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the bedside table. Groggy, I reached for it, my heart sinking when I saw my mother's name. Again. James stirred beside me. "She's still at it?" I sighed. "Apparently." Ignoring the call, I set the phone down, but before I could even relax, the hospital room phone rang. My stomach twisted. James picked up before I could. "Hello?" His face hardened as he listened. "No, she's not available right now." "Yes, we've already spoken about this." "No, she's still stable." I could hear my mother's voice through the receiver, frantic and insistent. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Linda, you need to stop." Then without another word, he hung up. I stared at him. "She called the hospital again?" "She won't stop." Anger bubbled up inside me. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. She answered instantly. "I don't understand why you're shutting me out," she started, already emotional. "I have a right to know what's happening with my daughter." I took a slow breath, trying to keep my composure. "Mom, I have told you over and over. James is my next of kin. The hospital will not give you information. Calling them repeatedly is stressing me out, and I need you to stop." She gasped, like I had just slapped her. "I'm stressing you out? I'm losing sleep. My heart is racing. I feel sick with worry. And you're telling me to stop?" I clenched my jaw. "Yes." The heart monitor beeped rapidly beside me. My chest felt tight, my vision blurry. James was at my side in an instant. "Breathe," he murmured. But I couldn't, because even now I was the one trying to calm her down, while my own body was breaking under the stress she was causing. James pressed the call button for the nurse as I struggled to steady my breathing. The rapid beeping of the monitor filled the room, a glaring reminder of just how much this stress was affecting me. "Okay," I said finally, my voice weak but firm. "This has to stop." James nodded. "Then stop it." I looked down at my phone, my mother still on the line, rambling about how hard this was for her. She wasn't even asking if I was okay anymore. I cut her off. "Mom, listen to me." My voice was sharper than before, leaving no room for argument. "You are not my next of kin. You do not need to call the hospital again. If you do, I will tell them to block your number." She gasped. "You wouldn't." "I would," I said, meaning every word. "Because right now I am trying to focus on keeping myself and my baby safe. And instead of supporting me, you're making it worse." Her voice wavered. "No, Mom." My throat tightened, but I forced myself to continue. "I love you, but I cannot keep managing your emotions while I'm in a hospital bed. If you keep this up, I will stop answering your calls." Silence, then a soft sniffle. "You're really cutting me out of your life like this?" I squeezed my eyes shut. "I'm asking you to respect my boundaries." She exhaled shakily. "Fine." I wasn't sure if she meant it, but I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. I ended the call and let my head fall back onto the pillow. James kissed my forehead. "I'm proud of you." I let out a shaky breath. I wasn't sure if I felt proud or just empty. The hospital room was quiet again, but my mind wasn't. My mother's words lingered, echoing in my head. "You're really cutting me out of your life like this?" James sat beside me, rubbing small circles on my back. "You did the right thing." I nodded, but the guilt was already settling in. Had I been too harsh? Was she really just a mother worried about her child, or was this another instance of her craving attention? I thought back to my childhood, to the way she had always made every hardship about her. My scraped knees turned into her stress headaches. My fevers became her sleepless nights. Whenever I was sick, it somehow felt like I had to comfort her instead of the other way around. But this was different. I wasn't a child anymore. I was an adult, a mother-to-be, and my priority wasn't her feelings. It was my health and my babies. Still, doubt gnawed at me. I turned to James. What if she really doesn't understand? With her condition, what if she truly doesn't realize what she's doing? James met my gaze, his expression steady. Maybe she doesn't. But does that change the fact that she's hurting you? I swallowed hard. No, it didn't. I had spent years excusing her behavior, justifying it because of her past. But at what point did my well-being start to matter more than her feelings? The monitor beside me beeped steadily again. No spikes, no stress. For the first time in days, I felt a little lighter. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the question wouldn't leave my mind. Had I been too cold, too harsh? My mother wasn't a bad person. She wasn't cruel, but she had always had a way of making herself the center of things, even when it wasn't about her. And now, when I was the one in the hospital, the one carrying a child, I still found myself having to manage her emotions instead of focusing on my own health. James squeezed my hand. You know she'll probably call again. I let out a breath. I know. Are you going to answer? I hesitated. I don't know. Because honestly, I wasn't sure what was right anymore. I knew she cared, but caring didn't mean she had the right to stress me out like this. I had tried explaining, tried reassuring her, and yet she still refused to listen. And that's what it came down to. She wasn't listening to me. I wasn't a child anymore. I had my own life, my own family to think about. My mother's feelings mattered, but they couldn't come before my own health. Still, that lingering guilt gnawed at me. Was I wrong for setting boundaries? Was I cruel for telling my mother that she wasn't my next of kin? I don't know. So, what do you think? Am I the asshole?